The sky above Newcomers was a swarm of gray clouds, and the promise of rain hung heavy in the warm afternoon air. Inside the school, kids sat waiting for our arrival, then restlessly anticipated the end of that day's lesson. This time, it was about a new way for them to plant crops, by carving lines in tilled soil with the butt of a rake, then sprinkling seeds all down the row. After the seeds began to sprout, the area would have to be thinned so that the produce could grow without competition. But of course, for children, the act of doing is always more fun than the passive act of listening. So while they politely repeated review words like soil and photosynthesis, we knew it was the outdoor activity that they looked forward to most. Once all slides had been slipped through and all images explained, we walked with the students across the wooden boards that connected each classroom. Outside the school, in the Newcomers' garden, green shoots had begun to sprout from every plot, some weeds and others crops. The ones we focused on came from carrots that were now ripe underground. We instructed the kids to firmly grasp the base of a carrot stem, then softly pull it from the ground. The softly pulling part didn't quite happen, but the students eagerly began yanking up carrots and tossing them into the crate. Soon after the activity began, the air was full of voices, all boasting about whose carrot was biggest or smallest, whose was most orange or most yellow or red, whose had the wonkiest shape, and whose was perfectly formed enough to be welcomed on a grocery store shelf. Once the plot was empty of all but wet soil, the kids split into two groups, one to wash the carrots and the other to weed a separate section of the garden. Once all weeds had been pulled and all carrots washed, a snack was made of the freshly grown veggies. I bit into a carrot and felt the tip snap. As we ate, Patrick asked the group, "So how do these carrots taste compared to the store-bought ones?" I wondered what the students would say as gritty bits of dirt crunched between my teeth. But they ignored the flecks of soil and earnestly shouted, "It's better, it's sweeter, it's fresher." Seemed like the carrots were a big success. So much so, in fact, that the students from another class, who had already been loaded into a yellow school bus, began rolling down their windows and asking us to share some of the snack. Seeing how happy the kids were to have grown their own food, and how proud they were to take some back to their families and tell them all they had done to make this, made me think of Iris Young's chapter titled Displacing the Distributive Paradigm. The fact that we were teaching the students how to garden rather than merely giving them food seemed to be something she would agree with. But of course, this is still nothing more than a distribution of knowledge. If institutions weren't in place that made getting such an education so difficult for immigrant and refugee children, then our services wouldn't be needed at all. Additionally, I thought of the fact that most American children don't know the first thing about gardening. Maybe that isn't a good thing, but it is interesting that we focus our efforts specifically on the students at Newcomers. Is it because we believe they have the least access to fresh food and therefore need the skill most? If so, why not try to change the system so it's easier for them and their families to afford healthier lifestyles? This would make general sense in accordance with points made by Young, but specifically it also makes sense since many of the students at Newcomers live in apartments. And in communities like Glenhaven, for example, residents have been explicitly forbidden from creating gardens of any sort on the premise. Therefore, it seems illogical to send garden teachers to Newcomer school, and yet we continue to do it. It makes the kids happy, no doubt, but does it really help them in the long run? Or should we instead focus our attention on systematic inequalities and the like?